Hey, welcome everyone to another episode of Gear Talk. I'm Wes Cash, and remember here at Gear Talk, we are connecting reliability professionals with reliable information. Today's topic, we're really going to dive into staffing issues within the lube industry. And our guest today is really no stranger to this. It's Rafe Britton, amateur YouTuber, consultant. He's been in lubrication for a while, and he's got some great messages. And we worry about these staffing issues that are going on because it's not only just going to impact the lube industry or maybe the lubricant suppliers, it may also start to impact the actual plant level people. So with no further ado, let's bring in Rafe. Rafe, how's it going?
G'day, Wes. Long time listener, first time caller. So I'm very excited for this one.
Well, we definitely appreciate you being here. Why don't you give everyone, part of this is we want people to understand the person that's given the information. So Rafe, a little bit of background here.
Yeah, so a little bit of background. So I'm basically a mechanical engineer, graduated out of university during, the Great Recession, as people call it, in 2009. Jobs were thin on the ground, and I found myself actually in the oil industry as a drilling engineer. So I do have some experience from the end user side, from a kind of operations and maintenance background. So I kind of pinged around the world for a little bit with ExxonMobil doing that. And then, personal circumstances found in about 2016 that we found out that my wife was pregnant. And that meant that my kind of far-flung adventures needed to come to an end. And I was very lucky enough to have a great boss at the time who said, don't quit. Let me see if I can find you something internally. And he found me a job in the lubricants industry as a lubrication engineer. And I distinctly remember him coming through the door. He opened the door and said, "How would you like to be a lubrication engineer?" And I said something unsavory to the extent of like, "What the is a lubrication engineer?" And that was my introduction to the lubricants industry. So, I worked as a field engineer for about 7 years, and then went out on my own a couple of years ago as an independent consultant. So that's a little bit of my background. I'm really passionate about teaching people about this field. So that's kind of reflected in the YouTube channel. And I just think it's like this, I've had an absolute blast in the industry.
Yeah.
Being able to, it's kind of like, I don't know, it feels like you're in one of those TV shows, those How It's Made
Yes.
kind of TV shows, because you get to see so much of different industries. And I've been really enjoying it, and that's kind of my story.
Well, I couldn't agree more. I'll tell you, I grew up on a farm. Oils and greases were treated as, this is oil, this is grease, don't mix the two. And that was about the extent of it. And when you dive into it, understand some of the intricacies behind it. And that may be a good segue here. So let's talk about the staffing within the lube industry. Now, you come from the lube industry as, we'll say, the manufacturer of lubricants and such. Mm. And it sounds like, so I'm in the U.S., you're in Australia, but it sounds like we're seeing some very similarities going on in here, where we may have technical expertise that may be retiring and maybe not, backfilling that as much as they used to. So what would you have to say about that?
Yeah, so I think you hit the nail on the head there, where this does seem to be a global phenomenon. Right, so it's not something that's unique to Australia or to the US. It's not even unique to our industry.
Yeah.
So I think a lot of your, let's say, end user listeners, they'll probably say, "Hey, that sounds like a phenomenon that's going on in my industry."
Right.
That we are short staffed. We are having, the baby boomers, if you like, starting to reach retirement age. A lot of the stuff that they know, it's not written down anywhere. It's not in a formalized procedure. And as we lose those staff, whether through redundancies or whether through retirement or simply turnover, we're losing all that knowledge.
Yes, it's leaving the plant. It's leaving the everything.
Yeah, and it's becoming a really big issue. Now, in the lubricants industry, how that sort of shakes out is having some ripple effects, which also affect how lubricants are manufactured and how they're sold as well. So, internally, if you think about the lubricants industry, and I'll just talk about like the technical roles,
sure,
mainly which we're concerned with. you've got technical roles in both the people that manufacture and come up with formulations, and then there's kind of the let's say the engineers at the coalface, so the field engineers. That's the kind of job that I used to do, which is helping customers with lubricant selection, storage and handling, and all that sort of stuff, right?
I always view it as kind of bridging the gap, right? Because you almost have the academic side, it's formulation, and then it's, okay, how are we going to take this and actually apply it to some sort of bearing, gearing, somewhere to help make that mesh.
Yeah, exactly. That, and that's actually how I saw my role as a field engineer, is basically to translate, the technology of lubricants into something that the end user can understand. Because, part of the trick is some of lubricants is chemistry, right? And some of it is mechanical engineering, and some of it's fluid dynamics. And the overlap, between the end user who tends to come from a mechanical background, if they're a diesel mechanic or a fitter or a turner or even a reliability engineer, they tend to come from mechanical backgrounds or occasionally electrical. And so the amount of chemistry that they might know is usually pretty limited.
Right.
And so we're trying to translate that technology into something that they understand.
And you see
but unfortunately,
the idea, someone will get stuck with, maybe it's a grease or something because they put it between their fingers and they like how it strings between it. And they don't necessarily link, what they're seeing versus what properties of the lubricant are important, especially for the application. It's just it's a gut feel in some cases.
Yeah, exactly. And that's part of the role of the lubricants industry, is to help translate that technology. And it's not just the field engineers, it's even the technical marketing guys, right, who need to deeply understand what's in the formulation, what's in the grease or the oil, and then translate that to a technical data sheet that they can then, explain to their customers. But getting back to the sort of like the personnel, if you think on the formulation side, how does that affect the industry? I generally say that at most oil companies, there's the guy, and inevitably it is a guy. If I could give a typical profile, that guy he's probably 65 to 67 right now. He has been doing formulation for the last 45 years.
Right.
He knows all of the technology. He knows where the bodies are buried. And the other key feature is that he wants to retire in the next 2 years.
Right.
Right. And in most instances, these oil companies do not have a backup. There is no kind of plan to replace that guy. And part of that's got to do with the way that we do staffing now. If you look across most of the oil companies, people don't stay in technical roles like that for 45 years to build deep application expertise. A lot of the time, you'll be a field engineer for 5 years and they'll say, now it's time for you to move on to a sales role. Now you're going to do business development. Now you're going to be a manager. Now you're going to do a bit of marketing. And so while that gives them, really broad experience, it's not that same level of very, very deep application or technical expertise that used to occur, right?
And
in the previous generation.
The ripple effect that you talk about, that cascades, right? Because if we don't have the technical acumen at the supply or at the manufacturer's level, right? These people may be retiring, like you're talking about. Then that gets pushed to distributorship. Distributorship may or may not have that level of expertise. Now it comes down to the user of, all right, now this almost has to become institutional. We have to have, you use the term "that guy." I like that. We almost have to have that guy on staff to help navigate some of this.
Yeah, and you touched on another kind of broad, let's say, thing that's happening in the industry at the moment, which is the move to a more kind of distributor-served model. Mm-hmm. And this is especially true when you look at the majors across the world. It's not necessarily happening in the US, although, if you look at the likes of companies like, Relodyne or, Move, some of those companies are becoming enormous distributors.
Absolutely.
Either of single majors or in a lot of cases, they're multi-branded. And again, you think of the ripple effect of that, because now these distributors, I don't want to kind of talk poorly about their people.
No.
But they are one more step removed from the technology than the major field engineers used to be.
Mhm.
And so the level of knowledge and access that they have to the technology is a little bit less. And so, again, the ripple effect of that is how are they then translating that technology for their customers?
Right.
Right. So if I could give a message to the end users who might be listening to this show, it's basically that a lot of the responsibility for understanding lubricant selection and lubricant technology is starting to be pushed onto them.
Yes. Oh, absolutely.
Right. So it's more important than ever that they understand lubricants, the role that lubricants have in reliability, understanding storage and handling, understanding the effects of cleanliness, and part of the way that they can do that is through robust training programs as well, right? And acquiring that knowledge through the likes of you guys. You guys obviously do a great job at Noria of doing that, and so to be able to translate that lubricant technology into something that they understand, like I said, that's now a responsibility that's being pushed onto the end user.
And it's, if we want to talk about like the equipment owner mentality, right? I mean, it is their equipment. They want to do the absolute best that they can. And unfortunately, maybe some of these strategic partnerships that they've had in the past where I keep going back to it because I like it. That guy was available to really help match this lubricant with this application is no longer there, or the application has now changed because more automation, different equipment that's actually getting installed. And now it falls back to this because we know that, all right, if we just follow an OEM manual that says, all right, use this lubricant, that becomes untenable at some point because then we've got hundreds, if not thousands of different lubricants on site trying to figure out exactly which one goes where. So the consolidation efforts go by the wayside. Storage and handling that you brought up becomes incredibly difficult just because of sheer volume of things. And it just has its tentacles in so many different aspects of reliability, of machinery lubrication, and just operations in general. I mean, you think about the poor storeroom clerk that's trying to manage all of this stuff, or purchasing, trying to set up all the vendors that may be required to get all those on site. And I think it's important to be cognizant that the user organizations do need to have some of that they hold dear, that they, while it may not be important that they become the most technically adept in lubrication, but they do have some fundamental understanding of exactly what they should be looking at. Because if we look at the Pareto principle, the whole 80-20, right? 80% of the applications out there may have, a very similar type of requirements from lubricants. So, the minority of your lubricants cover the majority of your applications, but then there's going to be those specialized ones that need a little bit of help. And whether that's from, consultants, oil companies, lubricant companies. I will say that I do know several lubricant manufacturers out there that do have, a good technical base, but like you said, it's almost like you knew them personally because they fit your profile, right? They've got deep technical knowledge, but they're also looking to retire pretty soon. And it's just, I don't know who's backfilling some of this.
Yeah, exactly. And that's something that we just need to prepare for, because I think that backfilling in a lot of cases is just not going to happen.
Yeah.
The lubricants industry is a little bit unique within the oil industry, right? In that it's so far downstream.
Yeah. Oh, right.
That even the employment dynamics are very different. So when people get hired into one of the majors, a fully integrated company like an ExxonMobil or a Shell or a Castrol, the lubricants section of the business is not seen as being the desired place to go, frankly, within that organization, because the budgets are smaller. People don't really understand what it's all about. Most people want to go to the upstream side of the business, right, where there's a lot more money involved. They get to be involved in construction projects, operations, and maintenance. That's usually where people want to go. And so, historically, the lubricants part of those businesses have struggled to attract talent. And that problem is in many ways only getting worse as, we struggle to bring in new people, because obviously, for people of, our generation, there are just so many other options. if you are skilled in kind of maths and science and those kind of, let's say, hard subjects, for want of a better word, then most people kind of see tech as being right the shining light.
Yeah.
And it's getting increasingly hard for us to attract people into the kinds of industries which you and I know and love.
Yeah.
And again, that's not unique to the lubricants industry,
Not
but it
necessarily.
does have ramifications for the end users.
I
Maybe another trend that
Go ahead.
I'll just quickly pick up on as well. When you said, having so many lubricants on site as a result of, let's say, the OEMs making, forcing through warranties and all that sort of stuff. Another potential trend that's on the horizon as well is, the rise of sustainable lubricants, right? So whether driven by government mandate or driven internally by sort of ESG criteria, what I'm starting to see the very beginnings of is this push for more kind of like biodegradable lubricants. Now, think again, the ripple effect of what that has on storage and handling, because most of those are ester-based.
Yep.
So now all of a sudden we have a completely different base oil that may become more and more common on site. And of course, esters and mineral oils, they're miscible, but you don't like to mix them. And, they don't do as well in the presence of water.
That's
so
it.
It's having that kind of knowledge that's going to really help people going forwards when some of these new lubricants start to turn up on site.
It's so many different technologies too. I mean, not just ester-based, but different additive chemistry that's going on, compatibility concerns, more and more composites out in the industry for seal materials where compatibility may be concerns as well. So, and I mean, instead of, going to the back to, hey, can you help me with this? It's now, well, no, this is what you need to do. I mean, you're on your own with it. And I want to circle back to what you were talking about with, maybe the glamour of lubrication, because I usually always say that, lubrication does have an image problem. It's not viewed as an exciting career. And maybe that does have, part of this to do with, the big debate on, do we go to 4-year universities and get degrees anymore? Do we just jump into the workforce? I mean, it's not unique to lubrication by any means. I think you're absolutely right about that. But it's concerning because there is a level of knowledge that needs to be maintained somewhere, right? Otherwise, as we continue to kind of push to do more with less, meaning more production with less failures, more production with less staffing, the knowledge that needs to be maintained within the institution has to be, you said, things aren't written down. This is just leaving with the people. We've got to have some level of, whether that's a training or a skills matrix of people that are actually involved to make this happen. And unfortunately, you see some people that are, falling behind in that aspect. You do see some that are doing very well, kind of creating their own internal, pocket of excellence. They're sharing information, but it's not as widespread as you'd hope to see. And hopefully we can get there.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, another knock-on effect for end users, we've got to start writing some of this stuff down. It has to be documented in the PMs because that knowledge is just slowly evaporating. And so if we don't record it anywhere, it's gone forever. Yeah,
and so many people, they'll take a little Sharpie and they may write, whatever the product name is on the gearbox, and hey, we're good. Now everyone knows, what goes there. Not realizing that, all right, that lubricant was not, stopped being manufactured who knows how long ago, or was shipped from one major manufacturer of lubricants to another, and we have no idea, what are the properties of the lubricant that the machine actually needs. But we're happy because it says use 10W30 on the side of it, and that's good enough.
That's actually a really good point, and something I've been trying to convey with a few of my end user clients is, we're trying to convey, in some ways, the what, right? So we're trying to get them to record in PMs, what needs to be used and how it needs to be used. To go a step further, which will help us, especially with these personnel shortages, is to also record the why, right? So why is it that we are using a particular product? Because if we can record the why, right, that will help next time it comes to a selection choice.
Yeah.
If we run short, not to pick on any particular company, but let's say Fuchs or a Shell or Mobil runs short on a product, and you need to pick an alternate. Unless you've recorded the why of that selection being made in the first place, you're kind of in the dark the second time round. And so again, having those records on hand is really going to help sort of like transition that knowledge to the next generation.
Well, we've already seen that at one point, kind of the supply chain snarls that happened during 2020, where, okay, I can't get this product anymore. I need to find an equivalent, and people not necessarily even understanding. I saw this a lot with electric motor greases. All right, we're using this electric motor grease. We can't get it anymore. We'll just put our multi-purpose grease in it, and, call it good. And it's not understanding the why of, how horrible of an idea that may be. Well, I'm getting told that we're running short on time. I can't believe we've already hit it. This has been great. But Rafe, I want to be a good host here. Any last words? Talk about the technical acumen. If you were given some sage advice here, what would you say to do?
Yeah, honestly, I think it would be two things. So we've already talked about try and document,
Mm-hmm.
right? And try and for an end user, try and build that knowledge base yourself, right? So like I said, the lubricants industry, they'll always be there, but there will be less technical expertise to rely on within that industry going forward. So as an end user, take the responsibility to learn a little bit more about the lubricants industry and lubricants in general.
I love it. And Rafe, real quick, how can people find you?
Yeah, so you can find me on the YouTube channel, Lubrication Explained. It does what it says on the tin. There's also a podcast called Lubrication Experts, where I interview experts in the field, kind of like this. And and then there's a website, lubrication.expert. So there's actually no .com or anything like that. It's the most arrogant sounding business name of all time, but I picked it because the .expert domain was available.
Hey, that works. All right. I love it. And I want to thank everyone else for tuning in for another podcast here. Remember, please like and subscribe. That really helps us out. And also, if you have any input or comments, or if there's a topic that you would like to see discussed, you can always email us at podcast@nori.com. I'm Wes here with Rafe. Thank you so much for joining Gear Talk, and we'll catch you on the next episode.